the debate about heroin and addicts, and this whole thing about everybody has a choice, and people are pissed because now addiction is now covered under medical insurance. It's now considered a disability, and there's a lot of people, they're unhappy about it because there's a certain stigma attached to heroin addiction. And I've had people hit me up and say, "Oh, were you a user? Oh, you did?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not a user. I've never put a needle in my arm. I've never done any type of drugs like that. I smoked a little weed back in the day, but I've never put a needle in my arm. I've never snorted coke." So people are like, "Why is this guy fighting this fight for addicts?" And my feeling is because, one, they get a bad rap. Two, because I'm here dealing with Dawn, who lost her sister, and this young girl who lost both her parents to heroin. And it's also because I've done a lot of homework and research, because I was ignorant once. Yep. To those who were addicts, I was ignorant once. I was one of these guys who was like, you know what? They chose. That's them. I'm living my life. I'm good. And then I started hearing the history and hearing the stories. And then Dawn actually works for High Point. And I can't say a lot about it, but High Point is the major place. The guy who is now head of the opiate war that that Obama just put into office back in October, he comes from High Point. Just some of the stories that you hear, you realize that not everybody has a choice. And like one of the scariest stories, two of the scariest stories that I've heard was, one, I did a show a week ago. I was invited on a show called Deadly Silence. The show, one of the hosts of the show was a pharmacist. Now, those who follow my debate about, I've always felt that the FDA and doctors should take an answer for this. They should be held accountable. A lot of people are like, oh, no. A scary point came out of this through the pharmacist. This guy was a pharmacist for 30 years, and he told me that the addiction to heroin and painkillers is worse in the medical field than it is outside. He said the reason why, he said, because when Vicodins and Perks and Oxy all first came out in their so-called try it out phase, he said that hospitals were flooded with these pills.
Yeah.
So doctors and nurses and those in the medical profession could go home, try them out, fill out the little surveys and see how they felt. So he said by the time that the public was addicted to Perks and Oxy, you already had a group of medical people in the medical profession whose lives were already ruined because they were taking these free samples home and trying. I'm like, holy Christ, that is a scary thought.
Yeah.
Because now you've got doctors who are addicted and they're pushing this product because they're addicted and they want it to be popular. And then the second thing that scared me, and I heard one of the two more things was, one was that I had asked someone on one of our shows on the booth, I had asked why is it that we see this strong addiction and nothing's being handled about it. And this person, she works for a company that at that time made cooling refrigerators for pharmaceutical companies. There's only two of these companies, I think, like in the world. She worked for it. And I can't say her name, but she had told me that what happened is that a lot of these pharmaceutical companies, the business of getting your pills out there is so competitive that they can't wait the 10 years of proper testing.
Yeah.
So what they do now is they bypass the proper testing period and they get it out in the market without the FDA approval, and then they pay high rates to insurance companies. That's why all of a sudden on TV now you see all these disclaimers about side effects, or you see all these things about, oh, if you took such and such and you now have this, you're entitled to this. Well, guess what? You're entitled to these these damages, this monetary damage. But let's be honest, majority of the time when these class action suits are all said and done, the victims don't get crap. The lawyers get a third. They get filthy rich. And the victims usually get
death.
Nothing.
Sometimes death.
Death or nothing, while the pharmaceutical company is still cashing in on the millions that was spent on the drug to begin with. So when I heard that scared me. And then I heard a story about a young man who was addicted, and people always say that everybody has a choice. And I got the story about a young 13-year-old boy whose dad was a drug dealer and had him bagging heroin at the age of 13. Around 15, he had a strange urge. He didn't know what was going on. He started smoking weed, sniffing coke, blah, blah, blah. And his dad turned to him and threw him a bag, and he he was on heroin. The point I'm trying to make is everybody says that they have a choice. Well, here's one of the many. He didn't have a choice. He was 13.
He was born into it.
He was bagging heroin for his dad, and he absorbed the heroin through his pores. So within 2 years, he was addicted to heroin without even knowing it, and he didn't have a choice because he was simply doing the task of bagging heroin for his dad.
Yeah.
So this is a kid who didn't have choice. Also, babies born to mothers addicted to heroin that are coming out the womb addicted, they don't have a choice. Someone said to me in one of these arguments, they said, well, they do because the dirtbag parents had a choice, so that's on the baby. No, the baby...
That's crazy.
That's stupid. I don't want to hear that.
Mike idiot?
Yeah.
You know what I'm hearing too is a lot of these people are getting hooked on heroin now because they started out, say they had a bad back problem or some health problems. They started doing the Oxycontins, but they got hooked on heroin because they can no longer afford the Oxycontins, and heroin is like 10 times cheaper than Oxycontins.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a serious epidemic, and why the people are dying from it too. A lot of people, before there was a lot of people hooked on heroin, they weren't dying. Mm-hmm. Why they're dying now is because back in the day, it wasn't as strong. Okay, so if you're a junkie, a heroin user, and you used to doing a certain amount every day, let's say you do $20 worth a day, right? And you shoot it in, blah, blah, blah. Well, nowadays, it's almost 100% pure heroin, so you still spend that $20, but it's 50 times stronger. They don't know it's stronger. They don't know how strong it is when they're getting it. That's why they're overdosing and dying.
Yeah, well, my girlfriend who's at High Point, there's two other things that happens too, is that they're cutting it with that fentanyl, which is like a blocker. So now the Narcan doesn't work and things like that. It's just, there's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes with this now. And she was telling me too, she says the reason why you've got a lot of people who are clean that fall off the wagon, she said that when you use every day, your body builds up a tolerance. And then she says, then you go cold turkey and you clean up. And then she says what happens is that every day that you don't use, it cuts your tolerance by 50%. So what happens is a lot of them, and she says they actually have to teach this in the classes, that if you're going to fall off the wagon, you can't take what you're used to taking when you were a heavy user. Yeah. And that's what happens. They go back and they take that same hit that they did when they weren't clean, and they end up, that's how they overdose, because they're not realizing that your body cuts it down by 50%. Yeah. It's scary, and like I said, I'm on Facebook with it, so. Yeah.
What I don't understand too is, because I know several people that were hooked on it, and how they got unhooked from it, they go to a methadone clinic, right?
Yes.
But yeah, they're on methadone for like 10 years. And I also know that a lot of these heroin addicts know how to beat the system. Yeah. If they have legal issues, they check themselves into rehab until those legal issues are over, because I guess you can't sign papers and stuff like that when you're in rehab. So then they come out, the court case is over, they go right back at it again. So also, they know the addicts also know how to buck the system, and they get all kinds of. I know people that are on disability right now.
Yes,
they're drug addicts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there's a lot of things that got to be brought to attention to this issue. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed. And you're right, Keith. You know, I know plenty of people that are amazing people. They are just hooked on this drug. They're not losers. They just cannot get off this drug. They cannot kick it. And so there's many things that need to be worse. So unfortunately, you had to deal with death in order to get educated, learn about this drug. But again, here's Sinista1 learning about something and doing something about it, because the more he looked into it, he's seen how it's affecting his own, not only his family, but his community. And
well, you know what the scary thing is too, and I tell everybody that's ignorant to it, I tell them, I'm like, look, you don't know how big of an epidemic it is until you lose somebody.
Yeah.
Like when this whole thing came out with Jocelyn, and people now learn that I had some. I can't say any names, but I had people that have been close to me for years, and they come up to me and say, Keith, yeah, man, I feel you. Oh yeah, why? Oh man, I got this going on, and this with my kid, or I got this going on with my sister, or I got this going on with my uncle, and there are so many people that have come to me now that were kind of in that closet, and I'm like, holy Christ, I'm like this, and that made me want to learn even more, because now I'm like, if it's like this and this many people are hidden, in my life, how many else are out there for others? You know, and like, we really need to fight this.
Yeah. And
I speak very, very highly on it, you know?
Yeah, and it's, you know, to me, you know, the more I feel people know, the more they're going to be able to understand and help out in their own communities too. And again, there's Sinista1 bringing attention to all kinds of stuff for his community. Again, and I'm only repeating this because I want, if there's young people or even older people, doesn't matter how old you are, I want you to be aware of what's going on, and when you have a power of influence, what Sinista does have a serious power of influence on a lot of people, but he chooses to use it in a good way, in a good light. And I'm hoping people catch on to this, because really, not just in drug use, in every aspect of life, you got to step up your individual game to make your life around you better, period.